Good day, everyone. We're making minestrone soup today. So there are many types of soups. This is a broth-based soup. We also have cream-type soups and purees, but this one here is one of your basics. So if you've got a cold coming on, if we're fighting some sort of sickness, these types of soups have always been the remedy. And really, we start off with a nice broth, and then we add flavoring vegetables and garnishes to those, and we flavor them up quite nicely. The vitamins and minerals that you gather from a good soup heal the body and help to flush out any toxins that you have. So why don't we take a look at what we have for our mise en place today. In our mise en place today, and let's just review that word. Mise en place just means everything in its place. And anytime we're doing cooking, as we talked about in class, everything that we need should be there, ready and available so that we can do the cooking. So it's part of getting all your prep ready. So basically what we have here today, we have bacon. I have some spaghettini. I'm going to use that as my noodle. A lot of times in class I use macaroni, or you could use little ditali or little stars or alphabets or whatever. The spices that we're going to be using, well, they're herbs actually, but oregano, basil, and thyme. Spices, we're going to be using cayenne pepper, we're going to be using white and black pepper, and we're also going to be using tomato sauce. So once again, the sauce that I make from my garden here, but you could use diced tomato, crushed tomatoes, whole tomatoes that you can chop up a little bit. We're also going to have some extra virgin olive oil, or any oil will do. I have white navy beans that I soaked and cooked. So anytime that you're dealing with dry beans, you would soak them overnight and then boil them the next day, and then they're ready to use. Or you could use a can of beans as well. All right, our flavoring vegetables today will be onions, celery, carrots. That's our mirepoix. And I have garlic as well, potatoes. The recipe that I'm providing you guys calls for zucchini and corn. I don't have that here today, but that's not a big deal. I'm going to replace that with broccoli. Okay, so we'll get started. So we're going to prep our vegetables for sauteing. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of garlic. So I'm going to take the ends off this garlic. And this one here, I kind of want the garlic to disappear, so I'm actually going to mince it, or give you the quick way of mincing it. And that would be to sort of cut it in half, flip it on its ends, like that, and then we're just going to smash it down. Same thing here, cut that in half, flip it on its ends, smash, smash, do it again. And I like three of these. I like the flavor of garlic. I think it has some real healing properties as well. You can also just run your knife up through it a little bit. Cut that off, and I'm going to move that to the side for when I'm ready for it. Next, my onion. I've already peeled it for us. We talked about it on the last one. So I peeled it and I've left the end on because I want to dice it. Okay, and again, we're looking for chunks in our soup. So this is a broth-based soup, and we want to have some of those garnishes, you know, floating in every spoon, but we don't want them to be too big either. So I'm just going to So remember your techniques, okay? Keep that tip down. There we go. I'm gonna do the other half as well. Okay, and then I'll move those onions to the side here a little bit. Get those ends off. Remember, we talked about these ends, right? These should never end up in your food. This is the little woody end, okay? So we want to make sure that that does not go in there. It could be thrown into a stock and be very flavorful, but not in this case. Celery. I'm going to cut that into smaller sections, and then I'm going to cut them sort of into rough sticks. And then I want to dice all that too. Okay, so I'm going to flip them over to this side. I hope you can see. All right, then cut, 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 cut. And shift that over to the side. Cut, 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 cut. Now I'm okay if my mirepoix gets all mixed up. So once again, just mirepoix, onions, celery, carrots. Okay, and those are meant to provide flavor, but they're also going to provide body to our soup as well. All right, so carrot. Carrots cook a little, take a little bit longer to cook. So I'm going to cut these squares maybe just slightly smaller. So I'm going into sticks here like that, and then I'm going with a dice. I'm going to flip that over here. It's unfortunate that I have such a small board here at home, small cutting board. But shift that over to the side. What I do want to separate is my garlic. I want to keep that sort of separate because I'm going to use that separately from my minestrone from my mirepoix, because I don't want to burn it. I want to make sure that I don't burn my garlic. And sometimes if you're trying to sweat out your vegetables and you've got garlic in there, sometimes the garlic will burn first, and we don't want that flavor. Burnt garlic doesn't give any good flavor to anything, so we'll make sure. All right, so my mirepoix is all cut and ready. I'm also going to throw in some broccoli pieces here too. Okay, so this is sort of a replacement. I didn't have any corn, but if you had frozen corn, that's classically in this dish, and zucchini is as well. The only thing I'll say about zucchini is that it should go in at the end of the soup so that it still has body, still has color, and so that you can still tell what it is, of course. Okay, so I'm just going to put this into a bowl. Then we're going to dice our potatoes, and then we'll start the cooking process. Be right back with you. Okay, welcome back. So now I'm going to prepare my potatoes. So I've moved my mirepoix, my garlic, and my broccoli over to the one side. I'm going to cut up my potatoes. So I peeled them this morning, and immediately after peeling, I washed them, put them in cold water. I don't want them to oxidize. Okay, and so the oxidizing will bring on this sort of pink, rusty, brown colors even, and we don't want that on our potatoes. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to dice these, and then as I dice them, put them back into the water. That way they don't oxidize either. Potatoes take a little bit of time to cook, so the smaller they are, the better. You just want little bits, maybe the size of your little fingernail here, okay, about that size, and so that it fits on the spoon, doesn't fall off, doesn't make a mess when people are having their soup. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm gonna take this potato. All right, so same thing as my other vegetables, tip down. I'm just gonna start slicing them about the thickness that I want them to be. And then I'm going to basically make French fries. Okay, so here, French fry, French fry, French fry, French fry, like that. And then I'm going to cross cut them so that I dice them this way. That's it. And I'll move those to the side, and I'm going to try to do this fairly quickly just so that I can keep them from oxidizing. And then back into the water they go. And then I'll take my last potato and I'll do the exact same thing. Potatoes tend to stick to the knife, and it's funny because we've talked about these knives. See these little blood grooves? They call these blood grooves, and they're supposed to stop things from sticking to the blade. You can see that that's actually not happening. So it's a great idea, but it doesn't really work all that well. So I'm not cutting between my fingers, but I'm just cutting and then releasing it like that. Same thing over here, cut, cut, cut like that. Flip it over to this side. And there we go. So I'll take these potatoes, put them back into the water, and then we're going to start the process of cooking. Okay, so I think you can see them here. They're all sitting in the water like that. I'm going to rinse off my board. Bring it back. Now, the recipe that I'm giving you doesn't call for any meats whatsoever, and you can completely make it vegetarian. I do that at school just to save a little bit of money as well. If you have some meat, great. Okay, and typically the types of meats we're talking about is bacon, pancetta, prosciutto, ham, that sort of thing. and you'll use that to start the process. And so I'm going to be using bacon today. Okay, so I've got about 4 slices of bacon here. The colder the bacon is, the easier it is to slice, and I want to cut it into little squares. All right, in the meantime, I'm going to start the heat on my pan here. Okay, so I'm using a little stock pot actually today. I'm going to just start getting some heat going there. Then, slice my bacon. And like I said before, the colder it is, the easier it is to slice. If you leave this out for a half hour and try to cut it, it will be very difficult, especially if your knife isn't sharp. So, very important. I'm just going to cross cut it this way. There we go. So that bacon is now ready to be sauteed. Okay, I'm going to move views now, and then we're going to start the cooking process. So we've got the stock pot heating up quite nicely. Okay, and so what we're going to do now is I'm just going to add a small drizzle of olive oil. That's it. And then I'm going to saute the bacon. So I'll take that bacon, I'm going to get that in there. Now, I'm not trying to cook the heck out of the bacon, but I'm actually trying to release the fats, or yeah, the oils in the bacon, and I'm going to be using those to saute my vegetables with, which will provide another element of flavor. Okay, I mean, how can you put bacon in something and it not taste good? Think about it. All right, so start sauteing that around. I'm going to start off with some high heat. So the one thing we didn't get to cover too much in class so far, especially for the grade 11s, was simmering and how important simmering is. Boiling is not a good thing. Okay, boiling is used to get things really hot and just sort of beat the heck out of the food. We want to simmer, which is slowly massages with heat, okay, and releases those flavors nicely. Simmering is a beautiful thing. But that means that we bring to the boil and then we go down and let it sit at a simmer. And that's going to be really, really important for our soup. Okay, also with the soup, I made my own stock. I don't know if you remember the post from a few days ago. I went to Superstore and purposely bought chicken breasts that had bones in them. And I used those bones and a mirepoix to make chicken stock. So I'm going to be using this chicken stock here that I made. But you can either purchase it, okay? You can either purchase it in a container, or you can also buy something like this. Okay, so this is a concentrate. The only problem with this is there are a lot of chemicals in there. There's MSG and all kinds of other things, heavy on the salt as well. So not quite as good, but if you're in a pinch, go for it. Doesn't just have to be chicken stock, it could be a vegetable stock, really up to you. Or you can make your own stock like I did. Okay, so this bacon is going out really, really nice. I'll try to show you. There we go. It's starting to release its fats. I want it to shrink a little bit. I'm going to render it down. And next I'm going to add my mirepoix, my garlic, and my broccoli. And if you were making the recipe that I've given you, the corn could go in a little later, and the zucchini would absolutely be at the end. The beans will also go at the end, okay? Especially if you're using canned beans. All right, so I've got a nice sizzle here. Okay, you can kind of see where we're at. I wouldn't mind getting some brown edges on there. That would be really good. And in I go with the vegetables. Wow, I did that without making a mess. Amazing. You gotta love these little foldable cutting boards. They're wonderful. Now what I'm doing is sweating. Not myself, but the actual vegetables. I'm sweating out the vegetables. I'm getting out those flavors. but I'm not going for any browns. I don't want any brown color to my vegetables. I want them to become vibrant, and you'll see the broccoli will become very dark green, and the carrots will become very bright, and the onions will become translucent. Once that starts, then I'm going to start putting in my herbs, okay, and start drawing out the flavors of those herbs. I'm using dry herbs today. So dry herbs require a little bit of heat and a little bit of time to sort of get all those flavors out, but they are a lot more pungent than fresh herbs. So if you're using fresh herbs, you need to use more. Okay, so you can sort of see going quite nicely. Those colors are starting to increase. It smells absolutely delightful. And now I'm going to start with my herbs. The recipe I've given you calls for Italian seasoning. And Italian seasoning is a mixture. And it's a mixture of thyme, oregano, basil. Sometimes they'll throw a little bit of garlic powder in there as well. And typically some cayenne pepper. Okay, so you can basically make your own, and you don't have to mix it. You can just start using it. So I'm going to use basil first, and I'm going to go with a good heavy pinch. Okay, so when I say heavy pinch, I'm usually talking about probably a teaspoon. So that's a real heavy pinch. I'm going to go with thyme next. Same amount. Oregano. Like that. Okay, and then finally I'm going to add some cayenne pepper. Okay, these are flakes, so they're chili flakes. You might have them in your spice cabinet as chili flakes. Same thing, they're made from the cayenne hot pepper. Or if you have ground cayenne pepper, throw a pinch of that in. Again, you don't like heat, don't put any, but this just brings it out. It doesn't give a spiciness to it, it just sort of brightens it up a bit. I want to start with my seasoning now too. So I want to help draw that moisture out of those vegetables and out of those herbs. Salt will help to draw that out. So I'm going to start with a layer of salt, and I sort of do that as I cook. So I add salt, a little bit of salt, a little bit of salt, till I get to the end, and then I check my seasoning and I serve it. Okay, so that's important. I'm going to start off with some salt, and I will add some pepper as well. And if you're measuring, depending on what stock you're using, maybe a teaspoon or a good heavy pinch of salt would be good. I don't know if you can see it. I know you can't smell it, but see how bright the colors are starting to become? So we're good now. We want to stop that process of any browning that may occur. So I'm actually going to put in my stock now. Oh, and back to the powdered stock. If you're using this, the instructions are on the back. Usually it's a little easier to sort of dissolve it in hot water, and then you can just use it there. But just keep in mind that there is salt in here, and that your salt levels will go up using this, yeah? Okay, so I'm going with almost, I'd say about a liter of stock. There we go, and that quiets it right down, doesn't it? So we're going for a high heat now. I want to bring it to the boil before I drop it down to my simmer. So what ingredients do I really have left? Well, I have my beans, I have my tomato sauce, I have my potatoes. Once this comes up to a boil, okay, then I'm going to add my potatoes. And then because I soaked my beans, they could use a little bit more cooking as well. So even though I cooked them this morning, they could require a little bit more cooking. So I will put them in at the same time as my potatoes. If you're using canned beans at home, then just put them in near the end. And really all you're wanting to do is heat those back up. Okay, so and I'm gonna let this come up to the boil, and I'll see you in a few minutes. So we're back. We're pretty much up to the boil now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my potatoes, okay? I'm going to take the water out. So I'm going to pour those in. Then I'm also going to put my beans in. So my beans, I'll put those in too. Okay, my tomato sauce. So this tomato sauce, when I call it tomato sauce, it's more sort of Italian tomato sauce, which basically means that these are tomatoes, a little bit of salt and a little bit of basil. And these were made last fall from the tomatoes in my garden. So again, as with that last recipe, if you have a nonna who gives you this stuff, this is gold. But otherwise, you can use diced tomatoes out of a can. You can use canned tomatoes. And you can also use crushed. It's nicer if you've got the chunks in there. But this goes in. And then the final piece, of course, is we're going to put some pasta in there. So if you have ditali or you have macaroni or something like that, you could throw them in there. All we're really looking for now is getting those potatoes cooked, getting those beans cooked, and then, of course, our pasta as well. If you had the zucchini, then that would go in right at the end, you know, maybe for the last 4 or 5 minutes of cooking. But for the pasta, I'm going to use spaghettini today. So what I'll do is I'll take some of this out, and you'd be surprised how little pasta you need. This even looks like a lot. Yeah, it is. It is. I'm just going to go with that. So if you were to look at it, it's about half the diameter of a dime. It's very, very small. And you could just sort of break these up and put them in there if you wanted, or there's another trick. If I take this towel and I put the pasta in the towel, I roll the towel up, and then I just kind of just crush it up like this. Now, of course, I'm using a clean towel, right? Use a clean towel, of course. And then basically I would just drop that pasta in there. The more pasta you put in there, the thicker it's going to get, and the more it's going to absorb those liquids. Okay, so some people really like that, but you'd be very surprised how much that pasta can soak up. And all of a sudden you find yourself with this just jelly. And this is the problem we always get into in class. Everybody wants a little bit more macaroni, and then at the end of the day, the whole thing just solidifies. So it's really, really important to just check it out. Don't put too much, but for this pot I've got here, that'll probably do it. And don't forget, you've got potatoes and beans and vegetables and all kinds of yummy things in there. So I'm going to let this simmer, and we'll see you in a little bit. So while I let that simmer, I take that time to clean up, right? So it's a good time to sort of clean that all up. I'm keeping my seasonings out just in case I want to adjust the seasoning. Okay, so it's really important. Anytime you're cooking, you want to sort of do your flavors in layers, and then the seasoning rounds it all up. Okay, so here I've now reached a little bit of a boil, so I'm going to drop that down until I can get to somewhat of a simmer. Okay, and that simmer is just a little bit of bubbling, but not boiling, not beating the heck out of everything. We just want it to be simmering. Okay, and that'll probably simmer for a good half hour. All right, so we'll take it from there, and I'll show you the end result. Ciao. One of the most important parts of cooking is always tasting. And we can't be gross with our tasting. So you guys will recall on your safety test, we talk about the 2-spoon method. Okay, so we're going to use that to test it. This way we can taste it over and over and over again without ever basically putting what's in our mouth into the sauce, or into the soup rather. So I take 1 spoon, this one here, and then I'll pour it into this one. And then I'll just check. That tastes really, really good. Actually, the seasoning is pretty much perfect. So I'm going to stop right there. Maybe a little bit more basil. How about that? And a little bit more cayenne. So I'm going to take that. And with dry herbs, I always like to sort of macerate them in my fingers before we go through, just to start that process. Okay? And then I'm going to put a little bit of the cayenne pepper. There we go. So a few more flakes in there. Not to bring heat. I'm not looking for this. This soup should not be spicy. It should not be hot to the mouth. But it rounds out the flavor. So it's really good. All right, I'll let this simmer. I'll show you how to put it in a bowl safely, and we'll talk to you in a few minutes. All right, so the final piece of this is serving it up. So many people make a huge mistake, and we talk about this in class as well. And the one mistake is this, holding the thing while we're trying to put the soup in it. It's looking for disaster, okay? I have done it a few times in my 30 plus years in the business, and you end up accidentally pouring hot soup on your hand, which is the worst. Then you usually drop the bowl, and then there's a mess to clean up and a broken bowl. So the best way to do it is leave it on here. Get a ladle, okay? So that's a ladle. You're gonna get some into there. Now you'll see it drips. I find a little tip is to just touch the bottom back to the soup, and you'll see that it stops to drip on you. Then bring it over and pour it out. Some people do some real weird things with the ladles too, and they contort their whole body, but it's really quite simple. All you need to do is here and then turn it like that, and that's it. All right, and enjoy. A little bit of Parmesan cheese on there would never hurt. Okay, and maybe some crackers, some fresh bread from the stuff that we made last week. Anyway, good luck with that. Ciao.